Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm David Percy. Up first on the breakup map, again, most of the southern rivers, central interior areas there from the Koyukuk on down have run their breakup course this year. And the, the Buckland River, pretty much mostly open now from the start to finish there. And the the Buckland River, the Kobuk River has mostly open in the upper stretch, and then some open areas down toward where it branches off there, and then just some open areas there. And then about the same thing there on the Noaa River, has some open all the way down. Really no problems going on with those three rivers. Now, really just watching the North Slope rivers, the Sag River has been about the same state for the last 3 weeks or so, with that narrow area of some open on the upper reach there toward the North Slope or in toward the Brooks Range. And the Kaparik River, still solid ice. And then the Colville River, pretty much solid ice, mostly ice, with kind of a narrow little bit of stretch of some open water, maybe a little bit more than there was yesterday, but not too much. So moving on to the fire danger graphic here. As far as grass goes, very high fire danger through just about all the central interior, the summer or the sunny, warm conditions, summer-like conditions. Temperatures in the 70s, and some areas starting to approach 80 degrees. Susitna Valley, Kenai Peninsula, and definitely into the 70s over the interior valleys there. And then that tapers off out to the west, more of a marine layer, keeping it cooler with higher humidities out over the Seward Peninsula and the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. But Bristol Bay seeing some pretty high fire danger as far as grass goes, and then also a little bit there north of the lower Yukon River on the Delta. Copper River Basin, high to very high fire danger, as well as the Susitna, Mananuska Valley, western Kenai Peninsula area. And also northern Panhandle getting into that high category with some very high, looks like up toward the Haines Highway area. And from there, going on to the hazardous weather graphics, we'll have that flood advisory out for the northern Copper River Basin, at least into Thursday, for minor flooding going on the Gulkana River and around Lake Louise Road there. Again, that's going to continue out due to snow melt probably into Thursday, the way it looks at this point in time. From there, going to satellite imagery, the visible shot showing lots of clear skies from the eastern Brooks Range right on down to the southwest coast there. That low cloud condition not as extensive or as far inland as it was yesterday at this time. Even lost sunshine there over St. Lawrence Island, Seward Peninsula, but some lower clouds hugging the Yukon Delta coast and into Norton Sound area. Lots of low clouds out over the Bering Sea, and a system way out just northeast of the low center, northeast of the Komodorsky Islands, and a weak front, kind of several bands of light rain, fog, and drizzle pushing into the western Aleutians. Otherwise, just clouds from Adak, Atka, cloudy skies on Alaska, sunshine over the Alaska Peninsula there, especially as you head northeast up toward the Aleutian Range. A mostly sunny day, Kodiak Island, but some low clouds starting to build just off the east coast there of the island, Fognak Island as well, and also low clouds pushing into the Barren Islands, south side of the Kenai Peninsula, and almost into Prince William Sound there. Moving on to the infrared shot, you can see some cloudy skies, a few showers over the southern panhandle, otherwise a dry day there with sunshine increasing as you head north, and lots of sun over the Copper River Basin. And clouds, though, developing with some showers and isolated thunderstorms there over the Glacier Mountains there up toward Eagle and then east of Fairbanks in that area. And some light snow falling over the eastern Arctic coast with westerly flow carrying weak surges of moisture and clouds from the Chukchi Sea and over the North Slope and along the Arctic coastal areas. And on the chart today, you can see that some light snow and fog occurred over the eastern Arctic coast, and to a lesser extent, amounts are quite light, water equivalent of about 1 to 200ths of an inch, and that's about it. And then the developing showers over the eastern interior areas, 40-mile country up toward Eagle, and then isolated thunderstorms starting to build, scattered showers, build-up conditions along the Alaska Range, all the way down to the Aleutian Range, with isolated showers over the Alaska Peninsula in areas mostly due to the warming of the afternoon. That's right over the mountainous terrain of the peninsula, mostly sunny Kodiak Island. Isolated showers over the southern panel, and then out west, that weak front with some moisture there, mostly from Chitka Island out to Chimney-Attu. Otherwise high pressure dominating the Bering Sea with very light wind conditions, and that giving rise to quite an extensive area of low clouds and fog, as we saw in the satellite imagery. And then down to the south, you can see a storm system there trying to push northward slowly. It won't really make too much progress, although you can see the gradient does move northward there. And we've got a lot more lines on the southern part of the graphic there, but the rain and wind shields stay well to the south, at least through tonight. No change out over the Bering Sea or the western Aleutians. That weak low-staying park there west of the Shimia area. Panhandle should lose the shower activity, mostly into Canada now, and that's just isolated. So variably cloudy skies. The southern southeast coast, mostly clear up to the north. Isolated evening thunderstorms over the Alaska Range, and again the mountains east of Fairbanks, upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country to maybe Eagle, and rain or snow showers up over the eastern Brooks Range to the Arctic coast. Otherwise just low clouds and fog, light winds again, and low clouds and fog due to light wind conditions into the northern Bering Sea through the strait there, covering all of the eastern and central Bering Sea, eastern Aleutian areas. And low clouds and fog might push into the Chiniak-Marmot Bay area of Kodiak tonight, but staying dry with light winds. Whatever fog does develop will burn off tomorrow for Kodiak Island, although you can see that low center starting to creep a little farther to the north now. Still a chance of showers over the southern panhandle. Otherwise, not much change. Another sunny, warm day interior Alaska with developing thunderstorms over the mountainous terrain of the Alaska Range, maybe out over the southwest interior, a little more extensive possibly there. Otherwise, temperatures upper 60s, 70s, some cases maybe even into the lower 80s over the interior valleys and even the Kenai Peninsula. Outlook for Tuesday, high pressure at the surface right along the North Gulf Coast. That might tend to deepen the marine layer for Prince William Sound, maybe into Resurrection Bay, and possibly trying to push into southern Cook Inlet there. But the big change out west, gale force winds coming into the western Aleutians, pushing in toward Atka Island, or actually Adak, could see some gale force winds by the afternoon. Southwest Bering Sea for sure. 40-knot winds from Chitka Island to Chimney-Attu with rain and fog. Otherwise, central eastern Bering Sea, light winds, low clouds and fog. Another sunny, warm day interior Alaska from the North Slope all the way down to the Bristol Bay Area and North Gulf Coast, 60s to 70s, pushing into the lower 80s possibly in some of the interior valleys. And that shower pattern still holds over the southern southeast coast, and rain increasing over Kodiak Island. Lows tonight in the 20s, North Slope and Arctic coast. Otherwise, 40s to near 50 over the remainder of the state, except mid-30s out over the Pribilofs, near 40 for the Aleutians. Highs tomorrow, again, 60s to mid-70s. Some areas pushing up toward 80 again, Susitna Valley and in the central interior valleys. Otherwise, highs having trouble breaking the frost point there for the central Arctic coast. And mid-60s southern panhandle to mid-70s up toward Skagway and Haines. Lows about the same on Tuesday morning that we'll see tomorrow morning, with 20s, lower to mid-20s for the Arctic coast into the North Slope. Otherwise, in the 30s for the Brooks Range, 40s for the northern valleys to near 50 and around the Fairbanks area, and along the Yukon-Kuskokwim River Valley areas, 40s to lower 50s, south central Alaska. In the 40s for the Panhandle, lower 30s for the Pribilofs, near 40 again for the Aleutians. And then the highs Tuesday afternoon, lower to mid-30s for the central and eastern Arctic coast, upper 30s to lower 40s for the western Arctic coast, and pushing up into possibly the upper 50s to lower 60s over the North Slope. Now to help kick that breakup for the North Slope rivers into gear. Otherwise, 75 to 82 for the central and eastern interior areas, and 70s all the way out till you get to Norton Sound, and along the coast, 50s and lower 60s. But Bristol Bay back into the lower 70s and upper 60s to upper 70s. Susitna Valley, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet areas, lower 70s for the northern panhandle, mid 60s down to the south, and in the 40s for the Aleutians and the southern Bering Sea.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Marginal VFR, Brooks Range out to the Arctic coast for Monday morning. IFR from the Bering Strait across St. Lawrence Island, just about all of the Bering Sea into Adak, westward to Chimney-on-Attu, and then areas of IFR along the north side of the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, marginal VFR, coastal waters of Bristol Bay, right along the southwest coast, otherwise VFR for the remainder of interior Alaska, some lingering marginal VFR on the south coast of the Panhandle. And moving on to the afternoon, we've got not much of a change. Marginal VFR for the Alaska Peninsula, IFR, Bering Strait coast, western Seward Peninsula, and south across all of the Bering Sea, and from Unimak Island westward to probably the Komodorskis, all IFR. Marginal VFR, central south coast of the Panhandle into Dixon Entrance. Marginal VFR from the Brooks Range to the Arctic coast. Tuesday afternoon, marginal VFR for the Arctic coast. North slope, though, not too bad in the afternoon, or VFR right across the Brooks Range. VFR all the way down to the Bristol Bay area and South Central Alaska VFR, Gulf of Alaska, North Gulf Coast. Still some marginal VFR along the central and south coast. It looks like it'll be mostly pulling offshore in the afternoon with good VFR over the inside waters. IFR, safe for a gamble, but Savunga, marginal VFR, marginal for the Pribilofs, and Unalaska and Nikolsky Dutch Harbor look marginal, as well as the western Alaska Peninsula. Anativik, starting out marginal VFR conditions, becomes VFR, and Adigan, same thing, marginal VFR improves to VFR. Lowest conditions, both passes will be on the northern entrance. Lake Clark and Merrill, good VFR tomorrow, and rainy, also pretty good VFR. And for windy, VFR. Isabel, VFR. Mintasta, another wide open day there, VFR. And for Tanita, VFR. Portage, also VFR. Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels 2,000 to 6,000 feet along the Brooks Range and into the northwest interior. Surface now way back along the central Arctic coast. 2,000 to 4,000 feet across the northern Bering Sea, 4,000 to 6,000 feet from Atka Island to the Alaska Peninsula, and under warm upper high pressure, 8,000 feet along the North Gulf Coast and over the Gulf of Alaska. For icing, we've got not too much going on, pretty much icing free over all of interior Alaska. For the Alaska Peninsula, maybe just a risk of some isolated rime icing moving into the south coast, but probably staying to the south through the day, and a little bit better chance of some isolated moderate rime icing from for the western Aleutians there from Amchitka Island westward to Chimney-on-Attu, and some of that spilling up into the southwest Bering Sea. Jet stream westerly still along the Arctic coast, 70 to 75 knots at 33,000 feet, and south 55 across the Alaska Peninsula, turns southwest up to 70 knots into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and then west-northwest 60 knots across the Kenai Peninsula, and that stronger wind flow stays west of the southeast coast, so light variable winds there. Westerlies over the Aleutians of 60 to 75 knots. And at 9,000 feet, still pretty brisk westerlies up along the north slope from the Brooks Range, actually, out to the Arctic coast, 30 to 35 knots. Over the top of that ridge, centered over the Susitna Valley. And to the south of that high center, we've got east-southeast 40 knots into Kodiak, Alaska, 55 knots south of the Alaska Peninsula, 25 knots there across Togiak Bay, but light for the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, as well as the eastern Gulf of Alaska and the Panhandle. And from there, looking at the 3,000-foot wind flow chart, 60 to 70 knots stay well south of Kodiak Island and to the southeast of the Alaska Peninsula, although tending to increase along the peninsula and southern Kodiak Island in the afternoon. But for the Aleutians and the Bering Sea, light variable winds under high pressure, although southerly on the western side of that ridge axis, maybe 20 to 30 knots or so. and then light and variable over interior Alaska. Westerly's not all that strong along the Arctic coast, 10 to 20 knots at the most, and pretty light variable winds from the Copper River Basin, really the central interior, down into the North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle. And for turbulence, occasional moderate chop for the Alaska Peninsula to Sitkinak and the Trinity Islands, surface to 5,000 feet. After the break, I'll be back with the Marine Fort.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining us here today is Eric Stevens from the Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, GINA for short. And Eric, you frequently come on the show to tell us about these really cool things that we're doing with satellites over Alaska and how we can use these really awesome tools. But I'm thinking all the while there has to be a mad scientist somewhere working on the next cool thing in the satellite laboratory. What is being developed today?
Right. Well, you know, when I was a kid growing up in the boonies in North Dakota there, on Sunday after church, the old people, like my parents and their parents, would gather and have coffee and talk. And I kind of eavesdropped on them a little bit. And the theme of a lot of these conversations seemed to be, well, isn't it amazing what they can do these days, someone would say.
Sure.
And I was thinking, well, I don't know, I was too young.
Right.
Well, now I'm old enough in the weather satellite business.
You can remember when.
The new generation of weather satellites, I'm starting to say, isn't it amazing what they can do these days? Because it's always improving.
Yes.
Maybe an analogy here is like television. Television started in black and white, then it went to color. Analog signal transitioned to digital here a number of years ago. Standard definition becomes high definition. Right. Well, weather satellites are changing too. First weather satellites went up around 1960, not that long ago. No. It's comparatively young science. And every time a new series of satellite is launched, we learn from the past, so the mad scientists decide, well, we could make the next satellite even better in such and such a respect. Yes. And now the United States is on the verge of launching, or in progress of launching, a series of new geostationary satellites that are better than ever before. Okay. Let's take a look at some of the previews of what these new satellites can do.
Peek inside the lab here, okay.
Yeah, and so we'll peek in, and here are some mad scientists and mad technicians dressed in bunny suits. This is, believe it or not, this is the business end of a weather satellite under construction in a clean room. You don't want a speck of dust on the lens of a weather satellite's camera. So this is done in a clean environment. They are building a geostationary satellite there.
Oh, cool.
This new generation of satellites, if you had to answer the question, why are these better? Why do we care? Okay. You could answer it with 3 words: faster, better, more. The new generation of satellites are faster than the older ones. The images are sharper, they're better, and there's more spectral channels. We'll talk about that.
Any one of these called Steve Austin? It sounds faster, better, stronger.
Yeah. You know what, though? These things cost more than $6 million.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They're pricey. But they are an essential tool for the Weather Service to fulfill its mission of protecting lives and property.
Exactly.
You got to have the tool to do the job. And it helps all of us when we get the accurate forecast, the warning in time, and this is the tool. Faster. On left here, we see what the old generation of satellites could scan in 5 minutes. On the right, that's what you get in 5 minutes, the whole planet, or at least one side of it. So it's faster. That means you can take more images over a given amount of time and make smoother movie loops out of that. Because animating movie loops really helps you highlight a feature that maybe you can't see as well in a single image.
Absolutely does, yep.
Let's zoom into a small piece of real estate like Texas.
Sure.
And we can see here a satellite that has a 1-minute movie loop visible light. You can see thunderstorms boiling there.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, the rippling of the top of the thunderstorm. This is a fun movie loop. We're going to be able to see things like this more and more often because of the new satellites being generated. Some things are only evident in animation. So that's faster. Well, what's better? We're able to now have sharper imagery than before. The Japanese have a satellite that uses the same imager that is on the new generation of satellites that America is launching too. An imager, that's just a word for camera. It's the camera on a weather satellite. We have something called the Advanced Baseline Imager.
Sounds important.
ABI. It's important enough, it has an acronym. Everything's an acronym. Well, an ABI-like instrument is here over the Western Pacific, and we can see this color image. This is what a human eye might see if you were riding on the satellite. But it's a little bit fuzzy. With new technology, you can post-process the image taken by the satellite to highlight and sharpen some of the features. So this image here of the Western Pacific then becomes this image. Thanks to the processing techniques, yes, this is the newest technology. So we've got a new satellite that can provide better data than ever before. And on the ground, we can process it better than before as well to really sharpen up the imagery and to give us a better view of the weather than ever before. So faster and better and more. What do we mean by more? Well, on the older generation of satellites, the imager, the camera, had 5 slices of the spectral pie, visible imagery, infrared imagery, something we can't see from the human eye. A lot of different slices of the pie. We're going from 5. The new imager has 16 slices. Each slice has its own relevance. Some are best for volcanic ash, for smoke, for dust, for telling the difference between smoke and dust, which can look similar under some infrared channels, but other ones bring out certain things. All of these 16 bands are important. In fact, some of the mad scientists, they didn't want 16, they wanted 24. There's always more you can do. But that'll be the next generation of satellites. So now we say, isn't it amazing what we can do these days? And you know what? It makes you think, well, what's the future going to be like too? It's so important to be able to know what's going on now in the weather. If you're going to forecast the future, you got to know where things are now. And satellites are the way to see that, especially in Alaska, where we don't have as many observations down on the ground. The satellites fill in the holes.
Yeah, really important stuff. And I love hearing about what we can see right now, but I love thinking about what is possible in the future. It's amazing stuff. And since you paid for it, it's a good time to learn about it. If you'd like, check out the website at www.goes-r.gov. And as I understand, it's a really easy website to use.
Oh yeah, a lot of good information about what these new satellites mean to Americans. And it's the Weather Service's mission to protect lives and property, and this is the tool how to do it.
Cool stuff, Eric. Thanks so much for sharing that with us today, and thank you for joining us right here in Alaska Weather Facts. We'll see you next time. And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Moving on to the coastal water forecast, pretty light winds, outer coastline of the Panhandle. The marine areas there, variable, 5 to 10 knots. Any discernible direction appears to be on the south coast there along Prince of Wales Island out of the east at 10 knots. Inside waters, light variable winds, 5 to 10 knots with slight seas. And for the day on Tuesday, southeast winds 15 knots on the outer coastline, seas 7 feet. Clarence Strait, southeast winds 10 knots. Light variable winds for Stevens Passage and central inner channels. And Lincoln Island Glacier Bay, southerlies at 10 knots. Prince William Sound, variable winds 10 knots, seas 2 feet. North Gulf Coast, variable winds at 10 knots with seas running 3 to 4 feet. Southeast winds at 15 knots for the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, Cook Inlet, variable to southerly winds at about 10 knots, more of a southeast direction out of Turnagain Arm. Then on Tuesday, variable winds at 10 knots, northern Cook Inlet. Same thing for Prince William Sound, variable winds at 10 knots. North Gulf Coast, northeast winds only 15 knots, but seas up to about 7 feet. And east winds 20 knots with 9-foot seas for the Barren Islands. Kamishak Bay winds will be light and variable. And for southern Cook Inlet, northwest breeze at 10 knots. Kodiak Island, east-northeast winds 20 to 25 knots, seas up to 5 to 7 feet. Small craft advisories from Sitkinak all the way down to Cape Sarachev on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. 30-knot winds out of the northeast, seas just under 10 feet. Much lighter conditions on the north side of the Alaska Peninsula and in Bristol Bay, east-northeast 10 to 15 knots, seas 2 feet. And for Tuesday, Bristol Bay down to Cape Sarachev, northeast winds 15 knots, Cape Sarachev to Sitkinak, including all of Kodiak Island. Small craft advisories, northeast winds 30 knots, seas running 11 to 15 feet. And for the Unalaska Island, north 15 to 20 knots tomorrow, 10 to 15 knots for Inmac Island. Variable winds at 10 knots for Adak-Anatka. And for the western Aleutians, Amchitka westward, south-southeast, 15 knots. Big increase in those winds on Tuesday with that next storm starting to affect the western Aleutians there. Gale warnings, 40-knot winds out of the east-northeast with seas building 16 to 17 feet. And small craft advisories for Adak-Anatka, east winds, 30 to 35 knots. And the eastern Aleutians, north to northeast winds 15 to 25 knots. Southwest coast, variable north winds 10 to 15 knots. Light variable winds for the Pribilofs. St. Matthew Island, north 15 knots. Same forecast for St. Lawrence Island. Norton Sound, northeast at 20 with 4-foot seas. And the outlook for Tuesday, Pribilof Island, St. Paul and St. George, variable winds at 10 knots, light seas. North winds 15 knots for the southwest coast with only 2-foot seas. And St. Matthew Island, northeast 15, north 15 for St. Lawrence Island. Norton Sound, northeast at 10. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, west winds at 15 knots for the day Monday. And west winds 20 knots for the central coast, back down to 10 knots for the western Arctic coast. And from Cape Beaufort to Wales, light northeast breeze at 10 knots. And on Tuesday, east-northeast 10 to 15 knots from Wales to Cape Beaufort. Western Arctic coast, east at 15. Otherwise, the central and east side looking not too bad. East-southeast breezes at about 10 knots. And for tonight, maybe a few isolated rain and snow showers to the eastern Arctic coast. Maybe the north slope, otherwise just variably cloudy, low clouds and fog along the coast, locally inland. That low cloud pattern will extend down into the Chukchi Sea and across much of the Bering Sea, kind of pushing back in over this southwest interior in Bristol Bay. Chance of moisture, you got to get way out from about AKwx westward, periods of light rain, fog, and drizzle there. Otherwise, evening thunderstorms possible western Alaska Range or all along the Alaska Range up into the eastern interior around Eagle. And dry for the Panhandle. For tomorrow, another sunny, warm day over interior Alaska south of the Brooks Range. Low clouds and fog along all the coastal areas, Bering Sea and the Arctic Ocean, with light variable winds. Afternoon thunderstorms developing over the mountainous terrain of the Alaska Range and the southwest interior areas. Otherwise, low clouds and fog possibly pushing onto the central and south coast of the Panhandle with a risk of a shower over the southern areas, and a couple of storms starting to make an appearance here on the chart for Tuesday with increasing winds for the Alaska Peninsula, southern Kodiak Island, and especially the western and central Aleutian with gale force winds in the forecast. Thank you for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.